This is part 2 of the video showing how to make an oak and fiberglass recurve bow. This video shows how to make the limbs. You start with 2 strips of oak. They're 1.5 inches wide by 1/4 inch thick by 2 feet long, 24 inches long. I would actually make them a couple inches longer, like 2 inches longer, if I was going to do this again, because I feel like the limbs came out a little bit too short. But they're okay the way I made them. Soak them underneath water for a day or two. And while you're waiting for that, you can cut out a board in the shape roughly like this. You just want a curved shape that's about like the side view of a recurve bow limb. Once your wood is soaked long enough to where you think it's got water, soaked into it as far as it will go, just take it out of the water and wrap it up in a wet cloth. Try to press out most of the air and just have the cloth in contact with the wood, because we want it to stay wet during this next part. We're going to microwave the piece of wood. This is an easy way of steam bending it. Just going to get it really hot and soften it. I'm going to cook it in a couple sessions of 30 seconds to a minute at about half power. Take it out, rotate it, cook it again, take it out, flip it over, rotate it, cook it again. This way you get it heated more evenly. And gradually it will get really hot to where it's all steaming and almost burning you to touch it. At this point, quickly bring it over by your form that you cut out and take it out of the cloth and clamp one end onto the form. The exact dimensions of the form are really not important. You just want a curved shape like that where it's more curved out towards the end and kind of straightens. Then just slowly bend it around the curve. If you bend it too fast, it can break. This happened to me a couple times. And I have that strip of aluminum on the side that's under tension right now, the outside of the curve. I'm not sure how much it's really helping, but I had seen something like that in another steam bending demonstration, so I thought it might help. It's probably really not necessary. Once you have it fully bent around the form, just keep it clamped on there and leave it for a day or overnight. You just want it to be on there long enough to where it will start to take a set and dry out a little bit. After it's been on there long enough to take a set, like a day, I guess, just take it off. And I have this other piece of wood prepared where there's a block nailed to each end at the length of the completed limb. So I can just force it onto there, and that will hold it in about the same curve that it was, but it will be exposed to the air so it can dry. And of course you're making 2 of these, so once you have 2 of them on there, you can leave them to air dry for a few days, or you can just skip to this part. You can see I nailed on a few more blocks back there. That was to try to take out some twist that had come into the limbs. You want to avoid twist if possible, otherwise you're going to have to add shims later to try to compensate for it. So we're going to bake this in an oven at a low temperature. This will dry it out and help it take a set the rest of the way, and it will keep it from taking a set in a new shape later when we have it strung up. You want it to be dry. I have it set around the boiling temperature of water. You can also cook it in a simple solar oven like this, just a box with some foil. This is how I did the limbs that I ended up using on the completed bow. The ones in the oven I screwed up in a different way later. either way works. So once they're dry, take them off of that form, that clamp, piece of wood, whatever you say that is, that's holding it right now, and compare the limbs. They should be pretty similar, but they'll probably be a little bit different. At least mine were a little bit different. If there's a big difference like this, where you can see they're about the same shape, but some is hanging off at one end, you can just trim the extra. This is some glass cloth that I got off of eBay. It's 8.6 ounces per yard, 85% unidirectional, and Volan coated. The Volan is just a coating that helps it bond to the resin. There's a lot of different coatings, but make sure you don't get the uncoated kind. I don't know if they even sell that very much, but the strips are the same size as the original pieces of wood that we started with, or the same length and width anyway. I'm cutting 4 strips so that each limb will get 2 layers on the back side of the bow, which is the inside of the curve. You can see the glass is about the same size as the piece of wood. It's actually a little bit bigger. I cut it a little bit bigger than the piece of wood. And this is epoxy. I'm going to be using epoxy resin on the glass because it's supposed to be a little bit better than the polyester, but you can use the polyester resin if you want. Just put a nice even coating on there. It doesn't have to be too thick, but you want enough to where it's going to soak into the glass. So then once you've got a coating on there, lay on your piece of glass. You want to make sure you work quickly during this whole thing, just so the epoxy doesn't start to set, but it does take a while for it to set, so you don't have to really hurry. Press the cloth on there, make sure it's fully touching everywhere. You don't want any bubbles, but completely getting rid of the bubbles is going to be almost impossible. Just try not to have any big bubbles. A few small bubbles is probably unavoidable. Then put another layer of the epoxy over that. Try to get it to soak down in. Lay the next layer of glass cloth on, and again just press it down, and after that put a smooth coating of epoxy over the top. These are the first limbs I made. I put on way more glass than I needed. That's kind of what ruined them. That's why I had to make a second set. Just cut it so you can see the taper measurements are on the screen. It's narrower at the tip and wider at the base. It's just a straight line taper, and sand the edges. And then we're going to drill a hole to match up with the bolt that sticks out of the riser at the base end of the limb. And this is just a little scrap of oak that I'm gluing onto the tip here. It doesn't matter exactly how big it is, it's just to reinforce the tip so we can cut in the knock. Sand it so it matches the outline of the tip. And you'll want to bevel it and make it nice and rounded and get a tip that looks a way that you're satisfied with. Once you've got the tip rounded and made how you want it, file in some nocks for the string to rest in. At this point your limb is basically done. You can attach it to the bow, and there's a little bit more that we have to do, but it's almost done. Get the bolts nice and tight and make sure the limbs are on there straight. like sight down it lengthwise to check if it's straight. You can see on the completed ones I did add some glass to the belly side just at the base because it was bending too much there. So it extends from the base out to about halfway out the limb, and it's a much heavier glass cloth that I used, like a mat. And I made a string for it that's 59 inches long is the actual length of it, or 63 inches by the measuring standard. So once you've got your limbs on, hook up your string. I made the string fall off the side of the limb accidentally there. And hopefully your limbs will be bending about the same. If they are, then you can just be done at this point, as far as doing real work to anything. But you'll still want to do a fine sanding on the limbs and clear coat them, but I don't think it's really necessary to show that here. But you can see this part is bending more than this part, which means that you should probably sand down the one that's not bending as much. That's called tailoring, just trying to get the limb to bend evenly how you want it to. But I think that's close enough to where I'm going to leave it. Since it's the upper limb that's bending more, it's okay. And it's not bending significantly more, just a little bit. The brace height is about 6.5 inches, which is fine. Now this is something called a tailoring tree, and it's setting on a scale. It's just basically a pole that has markings for showing how far you're drawing it. And you'll want to just gradually build up to a full draw with this, because if it explodes, it will be really weird. It would be stupid if it explodes. Fortunately, this didn't have any problems. Comes out to a full draw. I feel like that's about as far as it should be pulled, though. That's why I think the limbs should maybe be a little bit longer, because I don't think there's that much more that it really should go. That test was indicating that it was pulling a draw weight of about 35 pounds, which I was hoping it would be a little heavier than that, but that's fine. I'm satisfied with that. If you want more, you could add more fiberglass, or use a broader piece of wood. Time to shoot. This is actually the first time that I'm shooting it. I didn't do any tests before this. Putting the string on, it still looks good. Bending about evenly, it's balanced. I really like the way it came out looking. It looks like a normal recurve bow. I could tell right away that it had decent speed. When I shot that, that was pretty fast. That arrow that I threw off to the side was missing a fin. That's why I threw it over there. I'm shooting here, I'm not sure exactly how far it is, but I think it's like somewhere about 8 to 10 yards. Not very far from the target. it just seemed like it was really easy to shoot. Like, it was pretty accurate. I haven't shot a bow. Okay, it hasn't been that long, but I don't shoot very often. I got 2 arrows right on center, 3 near center, and 2 that were off to the side. So I consider that an acceptable grouping. Only the second grouping I've shot from this bow. So now, of course, figured everybody was going to want to know, so I had to test the arrow speed. These are about 380 grain arrows, 1,748 feet per second. No, that's an error, but anyway, the arrows are about 10.8, well, I'll just say 10 to 11 grains per pound of draw weight. I'm shooting about 152 feet per second. That was 152.7. You can't see the 0.7. 152.5. 152.7 again. At this point I was thinking, wow, that's really consistent. I don't know how it's so consistent. And then 148.2, which is slightly slower. But I figured out on that last shot where it was slower, the nock actually broke off of the arrow when I shot it. So I think it is really consistent on how fast it shoots. This is a 30-pound commercial recurve bow that I had gotten for a gift a long time ago, for a comparison. Only a slightly lower draw weight. I noticed that the tips of the limbs on this are much less recurved than on the homemade one. These go up just almost straight, a little bit forward of straight. The other one curves forward a long ways. These are the same arrows, so it's slightly heavier as far as grains per pound, but it's the same actual arrow weight. And the commercial one is shooting about 10 feet per second slower. 143.5. 138.3. I think that one I might have not drawn quite as far, because the rest of them seem to be more consistent than that. 141 point something. 146 point something. 142. So it's just a little slower. So that bow is done unless you want to like sand the limbs and clear coat them or paint them or whatever. The rest is just aesthetics. This is another bow that I'll show you how to make in the next video. It'll be using the same techniques and materials basically, but it's just a different style of bow. So anyway, thank you for watching.